Hey guys, it's God Bars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 246th episode of my series where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it has, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. So, The Chronic 2001 has always been a bit of a double-edged sword in Dr. Dre's career, in my opinion, because on one hand, it resulted in some of his biggest hit songs, which were singles so massive they still get endless play over 20 years later. But on the other hand, this LP suffers from the same issue many sophomore albums do, where the success and popularity of your debut album sort of blocks the shine a bit of your follow-up, because that material gets a microscope held to it because people are comparing it to what came before. That being said, it isn't like this album sold poorly or wasn't a huge success, probably because it had been long enough since Dr. Dre dropped his first solo album that people were ready for new material. I just think it's an example of a problem I've mentioned in the past where, in retrospect, people will create a top albums list and they'll put in the first album because it's considered the artist's magnum opus. Sort of like Biggie with Ready to Die or Wu-Tang Clan with Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers, where they pretty much have top spots cemented in for virtually any list. But then the follow-ups either won't get named at all or is put marginally lower on the list and downplayed to a degree. I wouldn't say either of these LPs necessarily outdo their predecessor, same with 2001, but that's really never a fair reason to not give something a shot, in my opinion, especially when it's made by someone like Dr. Dre, who's in pretty much any hip hop head's all time top three for best and most influential producers. In fact, I've seen a number of fans who actually named 2001 as their favorite Dr. Dre album over the original Chronic, and while it hardly had a fraction of the impact, I can still understand why someone might prefer it, especially if you are a younger fan going back to hear this stuff for the first time, because it takes virtually every element that made the Chronic so revolutionary and updates them for the new millennium that was right around the corner at this time. One reason this album holds a personal attachment to me is I used the instrumental versions of the songs to practice freestyles and try out new verses for years, though I did already know a good heap of them, because even outside the monster hits like Still Dre, The Next Episode, and Forgot About Dre, there's plenty of beats off of 2001 that you've likely heard behind countless freestyles over the years. It's a part of the reason that it's so widely agreed upon that Dre is like top tier when it comes to hip hop production, because his first two albums alone cover more ground than many artists' entire careers, and that's still not accounting for his pivotal work in NWA or the other classics he lent his talents to, like Eazy-E's Easy Does It, the DOC's No One Can Do It Better, Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style, or The Game's documentary, just to name a few. But easily the most important and consequential decision the Doc made in between his debut and the second album here was signing a little guy named Eminem, and while Dre would only do a handful of instrumentals on his first two studio albums, major label albums at least, the legendary MC still has a number of appearances on this LP, most famously on Forgot About Dre, and I'm pretty sure he was one of the people writing for Dre at this time. For some reason, Dr. Dre remains the only rapper I've ever seen who doesn't get his due behind the mic just because he doesn't write everything he says, even though he's always been transparent about it to my knowledge, and there's countless quote-unquote MCs who have writers yet don't get that same flack. I've never really seen Dre flaunt himself around as some amazing lyricist. And at the end of the day, he normally has a really dope voice and flow, which he knows how to utilize to his benefit. And ask anyone who's tried to record a rap song, and they'll tell you that that's easier said than done. The G-Funk sound had all but completely died out by 1999, the year this album was released, but Dre somehow managed to come up with a crop of beats that are able to maintain their West Coast gangsta rap flair, yet sound modern, full, and ahead of their time, as even now I still feel like these instrumentals have aged insanely well. Of course, Dr. Dre himself took care of virtually all of the beats on this thing, But he did have some assistance on many of these tracks from Melman, and interestingly enough, the only other production credit on 2001 comes from DITC's Lord Finesse, who contributed the instrumental for the song The Message. I mentioned a couple of the featured artists on this thing already, like M and Snoop, but there's a massive amount of other guest appearances, including Trey D, Devin the Dude, Hitman, Corrupt, Nate Dogg, 6'2", Tracy Nelson, Miss Rock, Eddie Griffin, Melman, Cheris Henry, Defari, Nocturnal, Time Bomb, MC Ren, King T, Cocaine, Jake Steed, Rel, Mary J. Blige, and Exhibit. For my favorite tracks, I'm going to leave out the giant singles I already talked about earlier, like Still Dre, Forgot About Dre, or The Next Episode. That way I can make room for honorable mentions like Big Egos, Lightspeed, Murder Inc., The Message, Fuck You, The Car Bomb, Housewife, Bang Bang, Some LA People, and Bitch. Then for the overall top three, I had to go with The Watcher, Explosive, and What's the Difference? Thank you for watching my 246th video. Next time we are going back to New York to cover one of the most heavily copied acts in early 90s hip-hop. So check for that video, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what moments you enjoy the most off of this return to form. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Righto.
Look, the key to my soul is locked in the cage it opens. The framework was made from my own rib cue. What came first, the crack or the crack lighter? Whichever one the first fiend used to bring back fire.